Hi, welcome to another Tea Time show with me, Mark Tillison. Today we are talking about AdWords Attribution. So just a quick run through of what we're going to cover in the show. So what is AdWords Attribution? So we'll go through what it means, why it's important, and what changes you might want to make for your campaigns. We're going to talk a little bit about click-assisted conversions and search funnels, which we've talked about before, and then the different AdWords attribution models, and then also how to then change the attribution model in your AdWords campaign. So as usual, if you enjoyed the show, give us a like and you'll catch more tips and advice on how to improve your business using Google AdWords and other channels online. So let's start just with some background about click behavior. How do people actually behave online? So a lot of people tend to kind of think in a quite a one-dimensional way that people will land on your website and buy something or inquire. And the truth of it is that people generally don't behave that way. It's quite rare actually for a single click to lead to a sale or an inquiry via your contact form. What we're going to call a conversion for the rest of this show. So what actually happens is there's what we call a click funnel or a search funnel, and that usually means that your customer will search multiple times, probably visit multiple websites, and probably visit your website more than once before they commit to buying something through your checkout if you're an e-commerce store, or filling in your contact form if you're looking to generate leads via your website. So that click funnel we've talked about before, but just briefly, that click funnel or search funnel typically is much longer if the product is quite a technical one or the service is quite a technical one, and if the service or the purchase is an expensive one. So if you multiply those two together for something that is technical and also quite expensive, quite a high ticket price, then you can expect many more search impressions of your ads and many more clicks before someone will commit to converting. So these four bars here just represent kind of a typical kind of click behavior. So the user is clicking 4 times, visiting the website 4 times before the conversion happens. And then what we're going to do is just look at each of these models as we go through. So with AdWords last click attribution, so this is kind of how it's always been done until quite recently, where you've got the option to change that, and it's now kind of thought of as quite an antiquated model, I guess. So last click attribution means that if a user searched for a particular keyword and clicked on your ad here, and then search for the same term again and clicked here, maybe they searched for something slightly different on their third occasion, and then maybe they typed in the name of your website and then clicked your ad at that point and then converted into a lead or a sale. So with last click attribution, that places that whole value of that conversion on that last click, which means if this is kind of research, high intent, brand, all of your value of your conversion came from your brand and the name of your website, and no value was given to these earlier searches. So let's say you're a holiday site and someone is looking for a safari holiday. Now that's typically going to have, I don't know, 6, 10, 15, 20, 30 clicks maybe before someone commits to something like that. It's quite a technical thing to undertake, it takes a lot of planning, and it's quite expensive. So what we're saying there is that the search term at the beginning of that, which is maybe safari holidays, doesn't get any credit, but it is part of that user journey. Maybe they're searching for safari holidays, then safari holidays again, and then maybe they think, well, actually I want safari holidays in Africa, and then they're researching that a bit more, and then maybe they talk about they're searching for garden route and maybe things like that, and finally maybe they end up typing in the name of your website because they've been on your site, they know that you've got lots of great information, maybe you've got great videos, they trust your brand, they're ready to commit and call you or pay a deposit or whatever it is that your conversion is. So with last click attribution, all of those research clicks get no credit whatsoever, and if you're paying for those clicks and you can't see any value, you're going to begin optimizing those out, reducing the bids, or even turning those search terms off. So that's where last click attribution really falls over. If we move on to the next one, which is just the complete opposite, this first click attribution would place all of the value of that conversion on the first click. So using that Safari example, that means that the first search for Safari holidays gets all of the credit. Your brand would get no credit if the brand search was the final click. Those kind of garden route queries or the specific country, all of those, none of those would get any credit whatsoever. So first click, again, just the opposite of last click, and no credit is given to the subsequent clicks until the conversion happens. The next one is kind of among my favourites, I guess, which is linear. And what that does is divides that conversion between the number of clicks. In my example here, I have 4 clicks, so you would get 0.25 of a conversion on each of these instances, on each of the keywords that led to the conversion ultimately, on each of the ad groups, each of the ads, all the way through that chain. And the other thing to mention here as well is it's not just that a conversion is 1. If you have conversion values, which I'd strongly recommend that you have, particularly if you're an e-commerce store, then the value of that sale gets divided in exactly the same way. So if it was a £200 sale, then each click in this instance would get £50 and 0.25 of a conversion. And that means that you can start looking in more detail about all of these keywords across all of your ad groups, all of your campaigns, all the keywords you're bidding on, all the products that you have running in shopping, and seeing where they actually add value in a much more kind of clear way, I guess. And then you can optimize and say, well, those things that we thought had no value, now we're using linear attribution, we can tell that actually they do have some value, in which case we want to keep bidding on them, and maybe we want to bid more than we thought we should. So it's just kind of understanding the value much more clearly. So linear, again, so it just divides the value and the conversion across the number of clicks that led to the conversion. And remember, this happens for each and every conversion. So some might be 1 click, some will be 2, some will be 3, some will be 5, some will be 6. So it will just divide them equally. So the next one, again, which is quite an interesting one. So this one is position based. So this is kind of a mix of the 3 that we've talked about so far. So AdWords will attribute 40% of the conversion and the conversion value to the first click, 40% to the last click, and then the remaining clicks in the middle will get like the linear model in the middle. So in this example, it will be 40 and 40, and then 10 and 10. If you have 1 click in the middle, it will be 40 and then 20 and then 40. If you only had the 2 clicks, then it would be 50-50. So there's no gap in the middle, so it divides the 20 between them. So that's quite an interesting one as well. And then time decay effectively looks a little bit like this. So the earlier clicks get less of the value of the conversion, and as we get closer to the conversion happening, the last click gets much more attribution of that value. So again, it's an interesting one. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. You really have to look at your data and decide which is the best model for you and for your data, for your products, for your website, for your audience. And then finally, the last one, which is Google's kind of creation, if you like, is data-driven attribution. And this really you don't have a lot of control over. This is Google AdWords deciding that particular search term at that particular time on that particular device for this particular sale is more valuable than step 2 or step 3 or step 4. So it's really saying, well, it was kind of a low intent search and it didn't have much impact, therefore we're going to give you quite a low percentage, or give that search, that click, quite a low percentage of the attribution. But then maybe it will decide, oh, that's a really high intent term, we're going to give that particular search and that particular click a much higher attribution. So less control over that, and you will need quite a number of conversions in a 1 month period. to qualify for data-driven. So you might find that that's greyed out in your AdWords account until you can qualify for that data-driven. You generally, which one is best? I tend to favour linear. Having done quite a lot of research and looked at obviously each individual account on its merits and look at the data on its merits, linear tends to fit quite nicely with most, but I'll show you just coming up in the video how you can analyse your own data using the AdWords modelling report, and then you can make your own decisions about kind of what works best for you. So let's head into the AdWords Attribution Modelling Report, and in here it allows us to compare the data with the different attribution models. So where I was showing you before, we're using the last click versus first click. A couple of things to show you here. So we can change the history window. So this, through your search funnel, the default is kind of 30 days, but you can extend it to 60 and 90, and that will have an impact on your data. So if you just watch these figures here, you'll see that they'll change. Okay, so some of our sales actually have a much greater funnel, and therefore the 90-day window of that happening obviously has a different kind of view than a 30-day or a 60-day. So leaving it with that, we'll use the 90-day window, and then also I'm looking at conversion value and conversion value over cost, so what we call the return on ad spend, or ROAS. So that is, it's kind of like return on investment, if you like. So it's what we got in sales divided by the cost of achieving those sales. And then the alternative is to just do the number of conversions and then the cost per conversion. So we'll look at conversion value over cost. So this example is an e-commerce store. So we can see if using the last click attribution model, which is the first one we talked about, we can see what our cost is, what the conversion value is for this first campaign, and then the conversion value over cost is 4.35, and then each campaign we can see in the list. Comparing that to the first click model, we can see that actually this gets 2.63% higher conversion value based on the first click model than on the last click model. So you can see the big losers and winners in here. So this one here is a brand campaign. So remember that search behavior where people, users, customers quite often will convert from the last click being the brand search. But if you don't have those initial ads running for those research keywords, then people don't know your brand, they don't type it in, they don't buy. So with the first click, obviously very rarely people buy from a brand search on a first click, but that's quite often the last click, which is why the brand campaign is the big loser here, and then this value gets attributed to other campaigns sort of further up the funnel, if you like. And then again, this one we can see this loses quite a lot on first click, but gains more on last click. If we change the model again, so let's change it to linear. So remember, this is where the value of the sale is divided equally between the number of clicks. So we can see that this is sort of fairly even compared to last click with this one. But again, our brand campaign, which is quite often the last click, loses a lot of value, and some of the other campaigns get more value in the linear model. And then if we do time decay again, again similar kinds of results. So you can see that although with this particular example there isn't a kind of huge difference between some of the more linear and time decay or even position based. There's not a huge amount of difference, so if you're kind of panicking about, should I use linear, should I use position based, if there's not a huge amount of difference, then it's not really a big decision, but you can see that it's a much fairer, either of those is a much fairer system than last click or first click, where you're putting all the value at one end of that funnel. And the reason that happens in this account particularly is that this has quite a short search funnel, so this would only be on average maybe 1.6, 1.7, maybe 2, maybe 2.2 clicks. Therefore, the linear model is virtually the same as the position-based model, and is also very similar actually to the time decay model as well. So there's there's not a huge amount of difference when you're working on an account where there are lots more clicks, where it's a much more technical sale or technical inquiry or an expensive one. Then the attribution model in AdWords becomes much more important. So that's the attribution modeling report, and I'll show you quickly. If we do conversions and cost per conversion, it will look very similar. So how many sales did we get? What is our cost per conversion? Last click versus position based. Let's just change that to linear. And we'll see that this first campaign is there or thereabouts anyway, not a huge amount of difference. But this one gets a lot more credit. This one gets a lot less credit, and the brand gets much less credit. Have a play around with those with your data. You need quite a big chunk of data. I've got a month here, and this is a campaign that spends a reasonable amount, but you could easily change that to 2 or 3 months if that helps you make a decision about which attribution model is right for your data, your campaign, your website. So how do we change the attribution model in Google AdWords? It's actually pretty simple. So once you've gone through the attribution modeling report and you've decided which is the right method of attributing the conversions for your data, you can just come into the conversion section in Google AdWords, find the conversion that you want. So if this is your e-commerce transaction conversion or what have you, or maybe it's your contact form, whatever it might be, just head in there, edit the settings, and then your attribution model will already be set. Usually it'll be last click by default anyway, and then you can just pick the one that you want. Now, something to bear in mind is that this change will only take effect from the point that you change it. So you won't suddenly see different conversion values in your Google AdWords campaign for the last week, 30 days, month, year, or whatever. It only affects conversions that happen from the point you change the model. So just bear that in mind, that when you are looking, if you change it today and then you're looking next week, that you look at the last 30 days data next week, you're going to have a mix of linear conversion attribution and also last click or first click or whatever you change it to. So just be really careful with that as you're trying to optimize based on that data. So but that's how you change it. So a final thing just to warn you about is that quite a lot of Google AdWords accounts will import the Google Analytics conversion tracking or goals from Google Analytics. So now the problem with that is with the Google AdWords native conversion tracking, it only cares about Google AdWords data and Google AdWords click. It really doesn't have any interest in organic clicks, direct clicks, or any other clicks. It only cares about AdWords clicks. Okay, if you import the Google Analytics goal, Analytics obviously is tracking organic and direct and email and social visits and AdWords clicks and Bing clicks and Google Shopping and everything else, and it's all together. So what Google Analytics does, and that has its own attribution modeling reports and so forth as well, but the really important thing you need to understand about Google Analytics is when Google AdWords is the last click, Google Analytics will pass that data through to Google AdWords. So if we go back to our click behavior and we think, well, actually this is an AdWords click, this is an AdWords click, this is an AdWords click, and this is a brand search that clicks an organic link to your website, that last click is not AdWords, and that means that this data for this conversion won't be pulled through to Google AdWords at all. And that means the first 3 clicks that happened on AdWords will get absolutely no credit in AdWords when you are trying to optimize. So going back to our Safari example, that means that Safari Holidays gets no credit, no attribution. That means Safari Holidays again gets no attribution, no credit. And then Safari Holidays Africa gets no credit, no attribution in AdWords, and you're paying for these clicks. And then the final click, which actually leads to the conversion, is one that comes from an organic search, and that means AdWords does not give you any credit for these clicks at all. So personally for me, I would strongly recommend that you use Google AdWords native tracking, native conversion tracking, and there's another post or a video on that elsewhere. I'll put a link in for you, but I would implement the AdWords conversion tracking to use that in Google AdWords, and also use Google Analytics, and then optimize based on the data on a comparative basis in Google AdWords, so you can compare the value of each individual keyword or each individual ad group or each individual product in your Google Shopping campaign in Google AdWords, knowing full well that it's possibly, arguably, over-reporting slightly because it's claiming all of the credit for every single sale. But it's much better to, I think personally, much better to over-report than to not have any credit whatsoever in Google AdWords. When you then want to see kind of more detail about the value between your different channels, so maybe Facebook, maybe Twitter, maybe YouTube, maybe organic, maybe your email marketing, maybe affiliate marketing, when you want to measure the impact of those channels and you want to have a look at the attribution model there, then you can look in Google Analytics and give yourself that wider picture. But I would strongly recommend use the Google AdWords conversion tracking for Google AdWords campaigns on your website. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you do have any questions, then do ask them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them for you.